Police said the killer never broke in. They never forced a door, which meant the person who planned this murder was already family. Let that sink in, because what you're about to hear isn't a story about strangers or chance encounters. It's about a family that shared dinners, holidays, and memories, until resentment quietly turned into something lethal. And before we go any further, ask yourself this: could you live under the same roof as someone who secretly wanted you gone? Because that's exactly what happened here. On the outskirts of Madison, Wisconsin, sits a neighborhood that looks frozen in time. Wide streets, neatly trimmed lawns. The kind of place where neighbors know each other's dogs and crimes make headlines. That's where the Harper family lived. To the outside world, they were solid, stable, unremarkable in the safest way possible. Robert Harper, 52, ran a construction business he'd built from scratch. His wife, Linda, had been by his side for nearly 3 decades. Their 2 adult children, Evan and Claire, still hovered close to home. A tight-knit family, or so it seemed. But inside that house, something was rotting, and no one outside noticed it in time. The night Robert Harper died didn't begin with screams or chaos. It began quietly, too quietly. When first responders arrived, they found Robert in the basement workshop, a space he'd built himself. Tools neatly arranged, lights still on. He had been struck in the head, once, hard enough to kill him. No broken windows, and ransacked rooms, and signs of panic, which raised a terrifying question almost immediately. Why would a killer take the time to be careful inside their own crime scene? Police knew then this wasn't random. This wasn't sudden. This was personal. As officers moved upstairs, they found the rest of the family waiting. Not hysterical, not confused, contained. Linda spoke softly, almost rehearsed. Evan looked tense, defensive. Claire barely spoke at all. Detectives would later say it felt less like notifying a family of a tragedy and more like interrupting something already in motion. And here's where things started to get disturbing. Because Robert's death didn't come out of nowhere. It arrived at the end of a long, silent war. Months earlier, Robert's business had started to falter. Not publicly, but behind the scenes. Contracts fell through, payments came late, loans stacked up, and money changes people. Arguments replaced conversations. Trust eroded. Friends noticed Linda growing withdrawn. Evan began showing up unannounced, demanding answers. Claire, normally the peacemaker, started pulling away entirely. But the breaking point came when Robert made a decision without telling anyone. He changed his will. No family meeting that, and no warning. Just a legal document, quietly filed, that shifted everything. When the family eventually found out, the atmosphere inside the Harper home turned toxic. Accusations flew, old grudges resurfaced, and something dangerous took root. The idea that Robert was the enemy. Ask yourself this: if someone stood between you and financial security, how far would resentment push you? Because for the Harpers, resentment wasn't just emotional. It was strategic. Police soon discovered something else. In the weeks before the murder, Linda had confided in a close friend that she was afraid of what this family was becoming. Not afraid of Robert, afraid of what was building around him. Meanwhile, Evan had been overheard telling someone his father was ruining everything. And Claire started keeping her distance, as if she didn't want to be present when the storm finally hit. These weren't random details. They were warning signs. Signs that everyone saw, but no one acted on. As investigators reconstructed the timeline, one fact became impossible to ignore. Robert was not surprised the night he died. There were no defensive wounds and no sign. He tried to run, which means he likely knew the person standing in front of him. Maybe trusted them. Maybe argued with them. Maybe didn't realize how far things had already gone. Think about that. How terrifying is it to realize danger too late? Because it's wearing a familiar face. And now, here's where the story takes a darker turn. Because while police initially focused on who struck the fatal blow, another question slowly emerged. What if the killer wasn't acting alone? What if Robert Harper's death wasn't a spontaneous act of rage, but the final step in a plan that had been forming for months? A plan built on silence, manipulation, and shared guilt. A plan that would force this family to either protect each other or turn on one another completely. Before we go any further, I want you to pause here. Who do you think is lying? Who seems most afraid? And who seems too calm? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're invested in uncovering how this family went from dinner table arguments to murder, like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because what comes next changes everything. In the next moments, detectives uncover evidence that proves one horrifying truth. Robert Harper didn't just die that night. He was betrayed, long before the murder ever happened. And by the time the full truth comes out at the end of the story, only one member of the Harper family will walk away free. If you thought Robert Harper's death was about one bad moment, you were wrong. Because as detectives dug deeper, they realized something unsettling. This family didn't explode overnight. They fractured slowly, piece by piece, and someone knew exactly how to exploit every crack. The investigation began where lies usually surface first. Timelines. Linda said she went to bed early. Evan claimed he left the house before midnight. Claire insisted she never came downstairs. But phone records told a different story. Calls, missed calls, deleted messages, not to strangers, to each other. In the hours leading up to Robert's death, the Harper family was in quiet contact, coordinated enough to raise suspicion, but subtle enough to deny intent. Detectives didn't confront them immediately. They waited. And people talk when they think no one's listening. Financial records cracked the case open even further. Investigators uncovered a series of unexplained withdrawals from the family's joint account. Tens of thousands of dollars were moved over several weeks. The money didn't vanish. It moved. Some of it paid off overdue debts. Some of it landed in an account tied to Evan. And some of it couldn't be traced at all, which raised a chilling possibility. Was Robert's death meant to clean up more than just family conflict? Was it meant to erase financial ruin? Or was it meant to secure control? Suspicion quickly centered on Evan. He had the most to gain if the will changed again. He had argued with his father the night of the murder, and witnesses described him as angry enough to scare people. Detectives leaned in hard, but Evan pushed back. He admitted the arguments. He admitted the money, but then he dropped the bombshell. He claimed Robert had been afraid, not of his children, of Linda. Evan told police his mother had become obsessed with what would happen if Robert disappeared. At first, detectives dismissed it as deflection until they heard it again from someone else. A neighbor reported overhearing late-night arguments, not yelling, but intense, controlled conversations, the kind where every word is chosen carefully. And then came the journal. Linda had kept a private notebook, filled with dates, times, and short, unsettling phrases. Not confessions, more like preparations. Talk to E. C. Pulling away. Can't let this fall apart. Investigators couldn't prove intent, but they could feel it. Something was being planned. Then suspicion shifted again, because forensic results came back, and they pointed toward Claire. Her fingerprints appeared on an object linked to the crime. Not the weapon, but something close enough to place her there. When confronted, Claire broke. She admitted she'd been in the basement earlier that evening, but she swore she left before anything happened. Her explanation raised more questions than answers. Why lie about being there? What did she see? And why did she seem more afraid of her family than of the police? At this point, the case felt like a maze. Every path led back into the family. Every answer created two new questions. But the biggest turning point came when detectives uncovered something no one expected. A recording. Hidden, unlabeled, nearly deleted. It wasn't video. It was audio, and it captured voices from the night Robert died. Not yelling, not chaos, but something far more disturbing. Calm, controlled, intentional. The kind of conversation you have when decisions have already been made. Investigators listened in silence, because in that recording it became clear. Robert's death wasn't the beginning of the betrayal. It was the end of it. Before we go further, I want to hear from you. Who do you think is manipulating the situation? Is this a crime driven by greed, fear, or control? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're still with me, subscribe and stay close, because what happens next exposes a truth no one wanted uncovered. In the next part of this story, one family member finally breaks. And when the full story comes out, detectives realize the murder weapon wasn't the most dangerous thing in that house. The real weapon was influence, and it belonged to someone no one expected. By the time detectives pressed play on the recording for the third time, the room was silent. No one spoke, because what they were hearing wasn't rage. IT wasn't panicked. IT was an argument that spiraled out of control. It was planning, measured, deliberate, calm. The kind of calm that only exists when the hardest decision has already been made. The voices on the recording belonged to Linda Harper and one of her children. They weren't discussing if something would happen. They were discussing how to move forward afterward. What to say, what not to say, who needed to stay quiet. And most damning of all, how Robert wouldn't be a problem much longer. That single phrase shifted the entire case, because it reframed everything. Robert Harper wasn't killed in a moment of anger. He was removed. When confronted with the audio, Linda didn't scream. She didn't deny it outright. She asked for a lawyer, but the damage was already done. Investigators finally understood the structure of the betrayal. Linda hadn't acted alone, but she also hadn't been a pawn. She had been the architect. According to prosecutors, Linda believed Robert was going to ruin them all. The failing business, the mounting debt, the will that threatened to leave her vulnerable. To her, Robert wasn't just a husband anymore. He was an obstacle. And slowly, quietly, she began reframing that idea to her children, not with commands, with suggestions, with fear, with the promise that everything would be better once this was over. She didn't ask them to kill their father. She let them believe it was the only way out. The breaking point came the night of the murder. Evidence showed Linda lured Robert into the basement under the pretense of discussing finances. What happened next would become the most disputed moment of the trial. Prosecutors argued Linda struck the fatal blow herself. The defense claimed one of the children acted first, and Linda only covered it up. But the physical evidence told a different story. Linda's DNA was found where it shouldn't have been, and the angle of the injury told investigators something chilling. The blow came from someone Robert trusted enough not to resist. When the case went to trial, the Harper family imploded publicly. Evan accepted a plea deal for obstruction of justice, admitting he helped clean up the scene and lied to police. Claire took the stand, and that's when the courtroom changed. She didn't defend herself. She didn't protect her family. She told the truth. Claire testified that her mother had been planning the idea for months, that Robert was dangerous, reckless, and about to destroy them all by the time the murder happened. Claire said she felt trapped, not just by loyalty, but by fear. Fear of what would happen if she spoke. Fear of what her mother was capable of. Linda Harper was convicted of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to decades in prison. The judge described the crime as a calculated betrayal disguised as family concern. Evan would serve time, then disappear from public view. Claire entered witness protection shortly after the trial. The Harper house was sold. The neighborhood moved on, but the case never truly closed. Because even now, years later, investigators still argue over one thing. Who struck first? Was Linda always planning to kill Robert herself? Or did she manipulate events so thoroughly that someone else crossed the line for her? The evidence answers most questions, but not that one. And that's the part that still keeps people up at night. So let me ask you, is a person more guilty if they commit the act or if they convince someone else it has to be done? Because in this case, the murder weapon wasn't just a tool. It was persuasion. Before you go, I want to hear from you. Do you believe Linda Harper planned every detail from the beginning? Or do you think the truth is even darker, that the family crossed a line together and no one wants to admit how far they went? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story held your attention, like this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the next case we uncover may be even closer to home than this one. Sometimes the most dangerous place to be is inside your own family. And the final unanswered question remains. If Robert Harper had recognized the danger sooner, would anyone have believed him, or was it already too late?